Welcome back to the Sports Business Take Podcast, your home for sports industry news with a little personality. I'm Paul Hine. He is Zach Creekmore. How you doing today, Zach?
Doing good, Paul. How are you doing, brother?
I'm really tired, bro. I got a lot of work this week, schoolwork and otherwise. Some of it's been really fun though. I was just talking to you a little bit off air about. I've been working for the athletic department, doing video and photo for like the basketball games, which has been really fun. So I have that a couple days this week, and then there's editing after that. One of my videos is going on the SJC Monks page tomorrow, which I'm really excited about. Um, it's a really good way to like practice my skills for like my upcoming internship this summer. So I'm really happy that Megan and Corey let me do that. My bosses, Megan and Corey, let me do that because I asked them, hey, like, can I please get more experience in this? And I'm so glad that they're like every time that I've worked since I said that to them has pretty much been doing video and photo. So it's been awesome, and I can't wait to keep doing it. I'm actually learning a lot. I started to learn how to use Premiere Pro. That's what I put your swim video together with. That was the first time I'd ever used it. So, I mean, hopefully that came out okay, in your opinion. I mean, I know you told me you thought it looked good. So, but we have more interesting things to talk about today, honestly, than what I'm doing for work. So, this past week, a couple news stories came out about a new Olympic style event. It's not the Olympics, but it's an Olympic style event where there is going to be steroids allowed. It's called the Enhanced Games. It's backed by billionaire Peter Thiel. He's the co-founder of PayPal, among others, and it's meant to be a quote modern reinvention of the Olympic Games. And the games will not test athletes for PEDs or steroids. So the first thing I want to ask you, there are so many things we have to talk about. The first thing I want to ask you is, we've both grown up in the era where it's been a steroid ban, right? Steroids have been viewed as a bad thing. Players have been either kicked out of leagues or suspended or maybe denied Hall of Fames in some cases because of their steroid use. And it's been viewed as this thing that is unfair and has a negative impact on professional sports. But does the unfairness go away when there's a level playing field where all of the athletes in the events are taking steroids? Is the playing field even now? And I'm not going to say yes or no, but I want to hear what you think.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's really hard to say because now that they're like, when you look at, let's say, early 2000s cycling and Lance Armstrong, right? And like he was clearly doping. We know he was doping, but every other competitive cyclist was also doping. So it became the league expectation that you had to dope to be competitive.
Right. Same thing with baseball in the late 90s.
Right, exactly. So then it becomes a conversation of, well, yes, it's a level playing field now because everybody's allowed to do it, but should everybody do it? Right? And
right. That's the big question.
The value of their success. And then also, I think we'll get into my opinion a bit later today of how I feel about it, of like what that does to our society and our relationship with sports as
True.
Athletes who don't want to dope and impact the possible medical concerns for the rest of my
True.
life.
But that's fair. I mean, I'd say the difference is the fact that there are no team sports in these games. It's all individual events, aquatics, lifting, combat, and gymnastics, and like some form of running, like athletic running, will also be in there. But the fact that it's like individually done stuff where it's timed, or you're competing against someone else and only one other person, and not as part of a team, I don't think should impact team sports, kind of like I think you were referencing, where like the athletes who don't want to dope don't have to dope, right? Even the athletes who compete in the Olympics who are in individual events still don't have to dope because they still have the Olympics. The Olympics still exists as a separate thing, but this is just like another avenue for people that do want to do it. And whether that's right or wrong is very much up for debate, and still the jury's out on that one. But it's definitely way different than anything the world has ever seen before.
Definitely. No, it's super interesting. And you're definitely right. The absence of team sports and its specificity in terms of we're being very specific to this one event definitely kind of helps protect it from that aspect of we're saying every athlete should be doing this. Um,
Right.
but my major concern comes into the fact of like sports are a microcosm of our society. And in the early 2000s,
Truth.
when we saw that, let's, for example, steroids become a major part of our sporting experience. And when you look at sports like weightlifting, where going on cycles of tren are kind of normalized,
Still
as a
to this day
person,
in weightlifting, that's true.
right, big time, and me as a person, I'm concerned with the influence of those type of people. Of we go and see these star athletes go and do these amazing things on steroids, and now children are watching it and saying, "Hey, steroids are okay. Oh, I want to do steroids like my favorite athlete, mom." Especially in sports like aquatics, like cycling, racing,
Yeah, I mean, you
individual
can speak to
strength
that as a
sports,
swimmer.
where it becomes a you have to have this, or I should have this so I can be like my favorite swimmer who's the best guy in the world because he hit this crazy time on that
True.
steroid, and I want to be on that steroid too, so I can have that success and that accomplishment, which shouldn't be the feeling associated with sport,
True.
in my opinion.
Counterpoint
Especially,
to that, though, I don't think that I don't think that steroids are going to be allowed for kids. You know what I mean? Like,
no,
I don't think just because this league exists, I don't think younger leagues of these sports, like let's take boxing for example. I don't think like the Youth Boxing Federation. I don't know what the Youth Boxing Federation of the U.S. is called. It might be that. I don't know, but I don't think they'll adopt a policy that says it's okay for their athletes to take steroids now just because of the fact that they have this enhanced games. I don't think that's going to be the case. But I do understand what you're saying, where it's like it kind of gets into the minds of kids, where it's like, oh, I just have to wait until I'm older and then it's going to be okay, you know? And that's probably not a healthy thing. But I think maybe the point of this is, at least from their perspective, they view enhancements as a personal choice. That's a direct quote, as a personal choice for athletes. So they recognize that some people are not going to want to do that, and I believe I believe that most athletes choose not to take steroids, although we don't know how prevalent that is. There are good tests now, but you know, science is always evolving, and people are always finding new ways to find loopholes. So the science of how do we dictate how like our policies are around these issues is always changing, and how do we capture what is right and what is wrong for steroid use in our league and what substances can and cannot be used. It's always changing, right? Because there's always new things being invented, and that as part of our modern medicine world, that's just the way it is. Which I'm not saying is a good thing or a bad thing, but I think basically the league is meant to acknowledge that we want to see where the advancements in medicine have taken our athletics. We haven't really pushed that boundary yet, and we want to see when we do push that boundary what's going to happen.
yeah, absolutely. I think that's definitely the concept, which I love. I think the we're going to test the unknown, right, is a beautiful concept and idea, and definitely something that is valid and like open, especially for as humanity grows and as we want to see our sports grow and change. And I totally agree with you. I don't see any policy changing. I just have a really hard time grasping the potential and recognizing the potential change of societal expectations where
True.
I know for a fact a high school kid is going to go and watch this guy lift 250 pounds for like 50 to 100 reps and ask, how did he get there and how can I do it? Just like I
Yeah.
did. and me not thinking as a high school kid, Zach, you're a totally different body type. You don't gain weight like that. You don't do this thing. You don't do this thing. And
Yeah,
see,
right.
oh, he's on this steroid. There's my solution. And I go from point A, where it's I'm a kid who can reach his goals by hard work and desire, to point
True.
B, I'm a kid who can reach his goals by hard work, desire, and steroid use, which is a great idea because my favorite athlete does it, right? So
True.
my massive concern doesn't come from the fact of I love the concept of testing medicine, making medicine effective, putting those 5-year plans in, seeing what it does, what happens to our bodies, how do we respond, how do we react, how can we become quote unquote a more evolved or elite species, right? How can we test the limits of what humanity is? How can we test the limits of what is the human boundary? But at the same time, how can we make testing the limit something that is exclusive to that type of athlete and something that isn't kind of
Widespread.
subconsciously encouraged, right?
Yeah,
Even though it might be verbally discouraged, how does it how quickly does it become
that makes
subconscious
sense.
that an athlete wants to do that, that a kid wants to do that, right?
Yeah.
Talking
Basically,
about
basically, the worry is like having steroids become in place of getting in the gym all the time or eating right or maybe a combination of those things, and instead you're just taking steroids and working out like as you normally would, and you see better performance. So I understand where you're coming from that perspective. I wanted to ask you a question. So we already view Olympians. This is based around the Olympics. It's based on the concept of the Olympics. It's not the Olympics, but it's based around it. We already view Olympians as superhuman. Does the creation of these games, of these enhanced games, take the word superhuman and what we believe is possible athletically to a new level?
good question. I think it absolutely does, right? Again, we're testing that limits of what is the human limit, what is the capability, what are you capable of, what is humanity capable of, and sometimes there's that unknown, right? So exploring that unknown and seeing that definitely sees a redefinition of what is the human limit and what are we capable of to that extent, which is super super interesting to see and super interesting to test. But also for
Agreed.
me, as someone who I consider myself a hardworking guy, somebody who really values that hard work.
Me too.
Like, for example, I swim. I I had never swam before a year ago or a year and 2 months ago, pretty much to the date. And now I'm able to
You
go
didn't swim
into
before college?
no.
I did not know that.
So
Wow.
it's really something where I went and I said, I go and I apply myself. I'm about 20 seconds behind every other guy that does my events. I'm hitting like I hit like a what was it? A 115 in my 100 breast. A guy in the same event hit a 57-second 100 breast, right? And to what extent does it say to someone like me who has less experience, maybe there is that encouragement to say, well, I want to accelerate my progress and go take steroids so I can be competitive to these guys in the same way that there's those other aspects. But like I look at an Olympian and I see someone who has worked really hard, and I look at an Olympian who's taken steroids and say, that's still someone that's worked really, really hard. But I feel like the kind of quality and the thing that you've earned feels a bit tainted in the way that
Yeah,
it's
and
not
that's always been the
the same.
reputation with steroids.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
why
It definitely has to do with the reputational portion of it.
that's why
But maybe
Barry
that's
Bonds
just,
didn't get in the Hall of Fame last year.
yeah, right. Definitely has to do with the reputation portion and also societal expectation, but also like I, in medically it's true. You look at steroids and they are things that change the composition of your body, kind of cause you to hurt people, and it's not something that I deem positively, based
True.
on that relationship within our society, but also based
True.
on what it actually does to people physically. Like people that go on trend break out in pimples, hives, are visibly
Yeah.
more angry,
There's a
and
ton of side
have
effects.
emotional issues where I really don't want to see that in my star athletes, nor
No,
would I
for sure.
want a young child. nor myself, a teenager, somebody growing up, to admire an athlete who examines those types of characteristics that are influenced by a drug or a steroid, kind of similar
True.
to rap and social media and all this stuff. We were talking about it in social and political philosophy today of really, can you sit in a room and be comfortable thinking that my child is listening to a song, and I know my parents weren't, that talks about sex, drugs, and money and how they're great and how they make their lives amazing. And how can that child then go and turn around and say, I don't want that for myself. I want a different type of life.
Yeah.
And it's kind of
So
hard.
so the one thing I'm gonna say is like about like I believe steroids in the past have definitely had those side effects, and that's part of the main reason why we view them, including the unfairness, as like a negative thing in our society. That's why
Mm,
they're viewed that way. But I wonder if this league leads to development of new drugs where they don't necessarily have some of the bad side effects. Maybe the doctors, because I believe they have like a medical advisory board. I read a couple of quotes from the head of their medical advisory board. So I wonder if their medical advisory board produces some new steroids where they don't see as bad of long term side effects, or they eliminate whatever chemicals were in the steroids to produce those side effects. And I just want to read a quote from Dr. Aaron DeSosa, who's the president of the Enhanced Games. He said that it'll be very useful in determining compounds and therapies to extending human life.
mm,
So, extending human life to me sounds more like they're trying to develop medicine than necessarily develop steroids to make athletics unfair. I
mm.
mean, like obviously they're gonna say that, right? Like that makes sense from a PR perspective to say. But I don't know. What do you think about that quote? Like, what do you think about that perspective? Do you think there's gonna be the right amount of like medical advisory that goes into it? Do you think they have new developments?
I think you're absolutely thinking the right direction of if this becomes something that's more of a medical study and less of a sporting event that we are trying to advertise, I can get more behind it as we're trying to see, especially if we're trying to extend the human life or look into ways of we can heal illnesses and solve problems. And if sports are a part of that, I think that's beautiful and amazing thing to do. But also, that's just kind of using athletes as a way to test new drugs and
True. And
steroids in a way that
is that
might not be
ethical?
healthy for their bodies, and that is really, in my
True.
opinion, unethical. In addition to like, and this might, I'm not trying to get political or in any way or form, but like with even when the COVID vaccine came out, it was rushed past that FDA 5 year process, and I felt really
True.
uncomfortable because they skipped that process and I didn't understand the side effects. Um, so
No,
I
I didn't
think
either. I have a very personal story that I'm probably not going to say on air, but I'll share it after. I ended up basically in the ER after getting a booster. So
yeah, and it makes it's uncomfortable because you really just don't know what's going to happen. So I love the concept. I think it's really important, especially if you're trying to push human limit or really in any way for any sport to have a medical advisory board, especially sports like that are high contact like football or sports which athletes like swimming, you're doing a no breath 50, right? What's the effect of pretty much nearly passing out every time you
boxing
swim?
too, another one
Boxing too,
that'll
right?
be
Really important to have those medical advisory boards involved. So understanding what their role is going to be will be super interesting, and
yeah,
understanding are they really are they doing this as a medical study and really saying, well, we can go and research this and maybe we can make new drugs that we can make a lot of money on because when you look at pharmaceuticals, it's all about money. Um,
truth.
or are they saying we want to test the human limit and we want to do this for sporting entertainment, which, in my opinion, means that the medical advisory board is going to be more involved with the health and safety concerns of the athletes and less the development of new drugs or medicines. Um, so there's some super interesting caveats and shifts and changes that can
Yeah,
come up. And I do agree with you. I think this medical advisory board is going to be really important. and how they communicate with the public is going to be super important to the success of this,
Yeah.
especially understanding if they're going more with the athletics aspect of it, if they're really pushing it as a this is a alternative to the Olympic Games. Um,
Yeah.
can they really communicate effectively with the public and the media that they are supporting their athletes effectively and are communicating effectively and are doing all the right things to make sure their athletes are safe and protected, although they are putting their bodies through something that they probably shouldn't be because it's not actually an overdosage of certain things for their bodies.
Right. There's certainly going to have to be a lot of rules and regulations. I do want to ask you a question about that, but before I do that, I want to read this quote from Michael Sagner, who's a member of the Medical Advisory Board. Contemporary drug testing practice in sports today is not necessarily about athlete safety. It often skews the public perception of fairness and health in competitive sports. So, do you think that's true? Do you think that's not true? Do you think um, the drug testing is meant to skew public perception? And do you think they're breaking that barrier, or do you think they're saying that as a way to get around um, having bad PR?
Oh, it's super interesting because drug testing is super complex, and there is a lot
Yeah,
to
it's
do
not
with
a
it.
subject that I know a ton about. I have to be honest. I don't know what goes into a drug testing process.
Yeah,
I've never
it's.
been really selected for one.
Mm, I'm sorry. I'm just reading it again to really absorb it because it's
Yeah,
just
no,
it's such a full
it's
statement.
complicated.
So part one, contemporary drug testing, right? So we're looking at what is a standardized drug test. What are we looking at? So it's a P test. Um,
Which is also
you know,
ever evolving.
correct. Um, and really, the way that it's practiced in sports today is we look at your performance. We see it as we're concerned that you may be under the use of steroids because your performance was above and beyond what the expectation is. And now we're looking at you as possibly being under steroid use because you're performing so far and above your peers. Um, one,
Yeah,
right? So it's not necessarily about athlete safety of we're concerned you're on drugs. It's
it's more
on
about fairness.
the it's more about fairness and the equality of the sport of we're concerned you're on drugs you're not supposed to be. Your peers aren't,
That's kind of where
right?
my mind went when I read this too. Was it's I think it's more about fairness than athlete safety. At least
Right.
the public perception of steroids is a bad thing because it makes the sports unfair. You know, if let's say like Barry Bonds, right, has the home run record by a large amount, and he was
Mm,
a good baseball player before he took steroids, but obviously that enhanced his performance and hit a lot of home runs because of it. Now, should he be judged like in the Hall of Fame? I'm that's not for me to say. That's for the writers to say who voted to not send him to the Hall of Fame. But
mm,
in like in my opinion, I think it is more about the fairness than like Mr. Sagner was saying here about the athlete's safety. I think they kind of go hand in hand too at the same time because you can't have fairness without having all of your athletes be safe, right? If one or two of your athletes is unsafe, then the game isn't fair. It's just not. So
mm.
um, I think they kind of go hand in hand, and so to me, them trying to spin it like that their new way of drug testing is going to be better. I'm not necessarily sure. We'll have to see how the processes really work out. And under that premises, will they have to regulate what can and can't be used eventually? That's what I was going to ask you before I read the quote.
I think absolutely. And looking at this again, like I think the media aspect of how this commission and the medical committee and all of this communicates this information to the public is going to be super important to them defining what this is going to be and what this competition is going to be and what it's going to look like and how the public perceives it. Um, in addition to, right, they aren't necessarily changing the definition of what a drug test is. They're just looking at it through a different purview, right? They're looking at
True.
it
I
in
shouldn't have said
terms
new way
of
of drug testing. I just couldn't think of a phrase.
no, you're good, you're good. And we're looking at it in terms of the is this safe? Is this healthy? And I don't think that's exactly what they're doing, nor does it come across as what that's what they're planning to do. It comes across as we're here for pure entertainment. At least for my first
Which I mean, it could be
reaction when I saw the
entertaining.
post.
It could
When I
certainly be
saw
entertaining for sure.
exactly, it absolutely would be. But does that have the interest of the athlete at heart? And then again, are they just taking advantage of the athlete participating in
Right.
their sport
There's so
and
many
letting
ethical
that hurt
questions
their
around
body
it.
for the rest of their lives, right? And it's just it's a touchy topic. I
Oh,
like
for
the
sure.
concept of redefining it because again, like an athlete like Barry Bonds, who was an amazing athlete, even though he was on steroids, should still be recognized for what a great he was. Um,
Of course.
but it's also super, super complex. And I think I skipped your question. So if you could repeat it for me just to make sure I answered it right, I'd appreciate
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. So do you think they'll have to regulate like what steroids can and can't be used eventually? Do you think they'll say these ones are not allowed and these are the only ones allowed?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, again, trying to create a fair playing field of like every single athlete is on this is super hard, but it is super interesting and a difficult concept. And I think it's something that they'll definitely have to develop in terms of either one, it's what you're taking, two, how much you're taking, or three, both, how much you're allowed to take and what you're allowed to take, where it might
Dosage.
limit those types of
Mhm.
things and try to create an equal and fair playing field.
I was thinking dosage is definitely going to have to be restricted at some point, right? There's got to be some rules around dosage because you don't want to have, like you mentioned, overdosing earlier. You don't want
Yeah,
to have
absolutely.
athletes do that, and if the athlete doesn't necessarily know a ton about the steroid that he's taking, which I mean, if
Mm.
anybody's taking a steroid, they should do research. But if they don't know a ton about it, if they don't know a ton about it, then and they don't know like what the right dosage is, it can lead to serious health risks. So
Yeah.
you really need to make sure that the dosage is right, and maybe you even have staff that when the athletes right before they go to compete in an event check the dosage that is in the athletes, right? Just to make
Mm.
sure, or staff that physically watches the athletes put the dosage into their body, right? To really regulate it. I mean,
Which is
that
crazy.
way, yeah. But I mean, you've got to have some parameters around it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, there's got to be some regulations. You can't just have like a free for all because it'll lead to bad situations.
Mm. No,
So
very true.
like in any organization you have to have fail safes and contingency plans, and I hope that they'll have the same where they have contingency plans, they have these regulations that clearly define what is and is not okay under these enhanced games because it is a space that nobody has ever really experimented with in this way before. So they're going to need to
Mm.
define what they believe in and what they don't believe in. Um, so another thing we've talked a lot about the ethical side of it. I want to mention the business side. You mentioned earlier about having it being a money making type of venture, and I believe in the long run, I don't believe they're trying to just get money. Um, and I'm basing that on the fact that the Olympics every year since 1960 to now have run over budget every single year. And in in this league, in the enhanced games, um, they are going to be using Division One athletic facilities as far as their planning. They're asking host cities to use already existing facilities so that they don't have to build a ton of infrastructure and waste taxpayer dollars, or or build a stadium and never use it again after 2 weeks. Right, that has happened in the Olympics before. So, do you think that kind of limiting their footprint will create the public perception that they're not as necessarily greedy or as much of a money making enterprise as maybe the Olympics could be viewed as? And I'm not saying I view the Olympics that way, but I'm saying that's like possible.
Mm. Yeah, and I think it's absolutely an interesting question, right? Of one, that's a crazy smart business decision of trying to use already built infrastructure to make things capable and make it, especially
Yeah.
when pool and blocks for a pool alone are $50,000. right?
Yeah, you would know
A
that from
pool is
personal
gonna cost you
experience.
3 million, right? And you're building the
Yeah.
building for that pool in addition to the in-ground dig. You're buying the land. You're building a track
Hmm.
at the same time, and all these different things of like, well, wow, that adds up really quick. Plus, we have this already built infrastructure. The colleges can make
Oh
money
yeah,
on it. We're supporting the American sports institution and how that all works. I think that is super smart business wise. Do I
for sure.
think it changes the perspective of we want to do this for profit versus we're doing this as a non-profit type exercise?
It's not a
I don't,
nonprofit, but
right? I don't see that at all. I think it still is. We're even though we're using facilities and kind of supporting that community of we want to support our college athletics and use that what's available. I think it's more of a
yeah,
smart business decision financially in terms of what they have to
yeah,
invest rather
I
than
agree.
what they're not trying to make from it, which
Yeah, it'll
is
definitely make them financially efficient for sure because they won't have to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on infrastructure. But I think to be successful, they're gonna need a media deal, right? They
mm,
gotta have a way to get their product out there. Do you think the likes of big media networks like ESPN, Fox Sports, CBS Sports, those types of places are going to be willing to attach their names to the enhanced games?
and
I
that's
know that's a tough question
and it's for me right now. The answer is no. I think it really depends on how this social
because of the
interaction and how
PR.
people feel about it. Mostly because those types of organizations are already connected with the Olympics. And I think
True.
this is seen, and probably by the Olympics, will be seen as something that's meant to directly
Competitor.
rival it.
Hmm.
Um, in terms of the we want to be that premier competition that people want to watch for these type of sports where usually it is the Olympics where you
For
see
sure.
world records broken and all this type of stuff in swimming and in track and weightlifting and all this. So I think if they already have a connection with the Olympics and want to stay connected with the Olympics and support something that's been that way for a long time, I don't see this getting that traction from those media individuals just because of that connection. In addition to
That makes sense. Yeah, like non competes and contracts and that type of stuff.
exactly, and then also how connected um, one the founder is, right, and
True.
two how it all connects to kind of how society is going to deem this. Like
True.
my
Yeah, I mean,
immediate
this is still
reaction
very
was,
new.
I don't like this because I wouldn't want my children watching it type of thing, rather
True.
than the reaction of, oh, this is going to be so cool. I'm so excited to see this. I want to see this on ESPN, right? With and that might just be me and me as a person because I'm very opinionated in a certain way towards drug use and that type of stuff, and that just goes to
Yeah.
my up. But I think if people are having that same type of reaction that I did, I would say ESPN wouldn't want to pick it up because of that PR aspect of like
Yeah.
why is ESPN supporting something that I wouldn't want to watch and I don't
Yeah,
want.
another thing I just thought of is they won't pick it up if their ad sponsors aren't okay with it, right?
Exactly.
If their partners are not okay with it, they would rather keep their partners and keep those relationships and keep the money flowing in from those partners than lose the partners to something that they don't know how is going to work out yet. It certainly has the potential to be successful because it's something that has never been seen before, but like you said, a lot of people might jump ship right away because of the ethical questions and because they don't want to be on the bad side of a PR story.
Absolutely. And that's exactly the thought. And going back to the partners thing, because I love how you said it. It's like the Olympics is their partner, right? Um, there's lots of other partners where this might not align with how they think ethically, and ethical
Hmm.
relationships, especially in business, especially in sports business, are
An
huge.
organization's mission, vision, values. We've been learning all
Exactly.
about that in sports governance right now.
And they are probably some of the biggest determining factors of the biggest partnerships you could ever think of, right?
Oh, for sure.
And you look at stuff like the way people have reacted to the Saudi deals and Saudi money coming into sport, and investigations
Yeah.
with that. Same thing with like PIF, and all this stuff where there are some serious problems, and because of ethical concerns, you don't see that as okay, and sponsors back out and viewers back out, and you lose money. So I think a lot of
True.
it comes back to that ethical piece that we were talking about at the beginning of this episode, where is this okay to watch? Is this something that humanity or America or the world, the earth, whatever, as a society are going to support? Is something they're going to get behind and see as interesting? Or is this something that they're going to see as this is trying to take advantage of athletes? This is something where we don't approve of drug use. It's not societally okay. This is something where I don't want my children watching it. I don't want them thinking drugs are okay, right? How does the American household respond to this type of thing? And how
Really, the
does the
world.
American viewer respond to this? And then even beyond that, how does the outside of American viewer respond to this type of concept?
True.
Because
True.
it is meant to be a world type competition, right?
Who do you
Based on
think
that.
will decide? Who do you think will basically decide whether it is ethical or not? We've been asking these questions of is it ethical? Do you think it's a public opinion thing? Do you think governments step in and regulate it? Do you think, or do you think the media outlets have the power to say we're just not going to put the product out there and hopefully it won't get out?
I
Do you
think
do you think it's a
specifically,
combination of those?
yeah, I think specifically in America, in the United States, right, it's going to be public opinion and media control, because I think media, what we listen to, has a huge influence on what people think, especially because I think
Wow,
more
I
these
just
things.
realized we're part of the media.
Absolutely, we are,
I didn't
right?
I didn't even like that didn't even click in my brain until like right now.
Right. I think a lot of
Small part,
people who
but
are coming up in society nowadays are really easily influenced by a lot of things, whether it be Instagram, TikTok, things they see on the internet. And I think
super
social
easily.
media
It's
and
very
media
noticeable.
outlets like ESPN, like our podcast, like other podcasts, uh, influence what is socially acceptable so quickly, right? Music influences a ton when you think about it. So there's a lot of
True.
things that play a part here. And I think that's true through most democratic type societies. So looking at societies like
Agreed.
England with parliament and more Western cultures, looking at some other things where maybe a country like Russia might get more behind this because Vladimir Putin finds it fun. I don't know.
Yeah, you
Or
know what's
something.
funny? I mentioned this to one of my friends the other day, and they said the Russians are going to be all over that.
Yeah, exactly. Which is, I find it funny, but like maybe you're looking at more Eastern European nations who have different government styles that maybe get more behind this and see a bit more regulation and support this. But it's just hard to see a pathway through public opinion and media opinion where this truly succeeds for me at this
Yeah,
moment. Maybe
I don't
that'll
feel like
change.
anybody's going to want to stir the pot. You know what I mean?
I don't think so either, and that's what's hard because I think it's a great idea, but I think there's too much red tape and
Stigmatization.
there's too tight of a line to follow where
Hmm.
it's going to be really hard to make this work, make it interesting, and make it something that people want to be a part of, and make it something
Yeah,
that they want their children to be a part of. Because really, when you're
yeah,
looking at success for a sporting endeavor, you're looking at success through the youth ranks and new fans coming up. And part of that is the adult child relationship with watching sports. Part of that is the child relationship of I seen a star athlete do this, I want to do this, and really that following. And I don't see this being able to connect with that audience and have that success.
yeah. I think it'll be definitely interesting to see which countries kind of allow athletes from their country to compete in these games and which don't, for sure, because I do think some won't and some
And
will. I think
here's
there's gonna be a line drawn in the sand by a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's where I think of I really need to see a clear idea of what we're thinking here. I don't know if he thinks of it as a national competition or if he thinks of it as I just want
It's
athletes
international.
from these countries to participate. So the countries
Anybody
aren't
can sign up.
people. The athletes are signing themselves up and saying, I'm from this country. I'm an athlete doing this.
Yeah, I believe that's what it is. Anybody can sign themselves up. There's like, I think there's, it said in the article I read, or a couple articles, that there was like over 500 athletes already interested. and including including anybody can sign up, including former Olympians. So like Olympians, when they're done in the Olympics, can go over to this now and say, maybe I'm a little older, I've gotten a little slower, my performance isn't as good as it used to be. I'm going to go do this instead. And whether that's right or wrong, the jury's still out on. But I think that's part of what they're hoping to take advantage of is maybe some of those older Olympians.
Mm. And I think for me, if I was an Olympian, I wouldn't want to be Michael Phelps, who goes and says, "Oh, I'm going to do this now too because I want to relive my prime." I want to be an Olympic athlete who ends with a history of culture and that aspect of kind of like, and maybe it's me being a bit of a prideful person, um, that I
No, I
really want
agree.
that, right? Or I want to have that end of my Olympic career where I ended it with pride and I respected my peers and I showed all this and I did all this and I
Yeah, it's
accomplished
athletic integrity.
Olympian without something, and I don't want to taint that athletic integrity with this changing thing.
Yeah, I mean, that makes total sense. I think it'll be super interesting to see kind of how this all plays out in the public view and whether that's going to directly impact whether this is successful or not. And I don't think there's a lot of instances in sports, maybe outside of individual players on teams, right? There aren't a lot of league wide or team wide ethical decisions, at least that like I can think of off the top of my head, that have such a public impact like this is going to have. Certainly, like with players, there's ethical decisions to be made. Like we've seen players mess up in several ways that honestly we don't even need to get into because they're their own issues, but and get expelled from leagues, get banned for life or for a few years, right? Um, and that does tarnish their reputation. So I wonder how this will play out in the public view, and I don't think really either you and I can give an answer to that right now. But it's super interesting to talk about because there are so many different possibilities that this new creation could lead to.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there just isn't enough information out right now because it is so new. Literally came
Yeah.
out this weekend. So kind of looking at it as like, well, this is going to be super interesting to see develop, but we really just don't know where it's going yet. And
Yeah.
it's kind of hard without all that groundwork laid out to see what it is going to be. And
Yeah.
right now, without that groundwork, I can't say that I fully am behind it. I can't say that I'm fully excited for it. I'm excited to see what happens, but
Me
I
too.
don't see it that will succeed
I could
perspective
say
we have right now.
I could see it being a thing that could be successful the first time it happens because it's
Mm,
new and because people want to check it out, and then
yeah,
having it kind of die out. Maybe not die out, but not succeed to the level it would the first time after that. Just because of the nature of it. And you're right, this is like an issue where everybody is going to have a strong opinion. You're either on one side or the other on this issue. There isn't really a lot of room for a middle ground, which is actually pretty interesting that we're talking about it in like this format because you don't want to say anything like too strong, you know what I mean? Um, and like make it an issue, but it is an issue where you have to say like it's I'm gonna watch it or I'm not gonna watch it or I'm gonna support it or I'm not gonna support it. And I think I think it'll be interesting to see how the public reacts to that. Um, it's
absolutely.
definitely it's definitely like you said earlier a touchy issue, but
Mm.
one that is really interesting.
Yeah, well said. And I think for me, the biggest concern is that longevity piece of, yeah, I think it'll be interesting for a quick moment, but will people want to go and watch it again and again and again? And will, again, as I said, people want to bring up their kids saying, hey, here's something that I support and I want you to watch too. Look at this guy who does lots of steroids and is super successful in his sport. How cool is that?
True.
Right. And that's
Yeah, I
me
wonder what
being
their
super
target audience will be.
right? But what is their target audience? How does that develop? How do we see that develop for years to come? And then kind of like how does that create longevity in a sports fan, right? When you look at the biggest sports in the world, they are built on that historical, longevitive, super strong relationships that I don't see this developing because of the cultural and societal issues it relates to, which is hard to say, and that's me being
That's a
harsh.
very fair take. No, that's a fair take.
But it is just the fact, in my opinion, at this moment in time. Thank you. I
I mean,
appreciate you.
it's kind of the reality of the world, right? And you never know. This could this could be very successful, and it also may fall on its feet, before it even really gets off the ground. So super interesting to see how this will develop. I think we've really probably covered everything that we could on this. Hopefully, we haven't been too controversial. Although I think it
If
was
I
kind of
have
interesting.
been, I have no apologies. I'm being honest. If
I
I've
mean,
been
yeah,
harsh,
right. I feel like you should be able to be honest in a podcast format, right? Um, but I think being controversial, it's not like to get clicks or anything. Like that's not what we're trying to do. But I think it's one of those issues where you either stance you take is gonna be controversial. You know what I mean? Um, so definitely super interesting to talk about in this format. And I kind of wanted to do a story on this because of its controversiality, and that's what makes it interesting at its base, right? That is what makes it interesting is its controversiality. So I think I said that right. I hope.
you did.
Um,
Good
okay,
use, good
good.
vocabulary.
Okay, good. Um, so the next time will be a lot less controversial. Next time we record, we'll have a guest on. I believe this week. I haven't completely confirmed that yet, so I'll let you know, and you guys, the listeners, can look forward to that. I think this is going to be a really good one. I'm personally going to really enjoy this interview. I think so anyway. So as always, thank you guys for listening. Let us know your opinions on what you think about this new league, where you fall on the line, and whether you think that this is a smart decision for the world, and B, a smart decision for them to even attempt this from a business perspective, right? Do we think it is going to succeed? So I'm curious to see what our listeners, what our audience thinks about that. Um, that's something I may or may not post on LinkedIn. We'll see. Uh, I think that'd be an interesting LinkedIn conversation. But
I
at the same
agree. I
time,
think it'd be a great LinkedIn conversation.
I don't want to like I said, I don't want to be like too controversial. So I'm because that is
Everybody
a
on LinkedIn
professional.
love it, bro. I'm promising you.
I mean, it's a
I would
professional
poll it, Chris
platform. I want to
Jeff.
be
Do
professional.
you want your kids to watch this? Question mark. That would be my number one question.
Really,
Yes.
I'll send you the clip of you saying it then, and you can post it.
I'm taking no prisoners. I'm here for it.
Okay, man. All right. So hopefully you guys will see some cool stuff out from us the rest of this week. I am super busy though, so I don't know how much time I'll have for editing this week's, but I'll do my best. As always, thank you guys for listening, and have a great rest of your week.